Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dungeon Dive. Daniel here. Alright, today we're going to take a look at Dreamwars from Royal Art Games. I don't think they are a company anymore. This is kind of a lesser known adventure game, an overland crawl. And the reasons that it is lesser known are probably pretty good because in all actuality, this is not a very good game. The rules are kind of a mess. The developer, the company, Royal Art Games, they promised a updated rule book and an FAQ, and those were never delivered. The developer, the designer, the company, publisher, all of them are probably the same. It was a Kickstarter game. They were completely absent on the forums at Board Game Geek. The game came out, I believe, in 2017, and there are only like 45 threads on BGG about the game. It's kind of a dead, lost game, and it is not, I would not consider it anywhere close to kind of an undiscovered gem or a lost game that you should go out and search. Unless, and here's the thing, unless you want a really cool map to play other games on. And we're going to talk about that in a minute because I have an upcoming project that you are going to see this map in. However, what is Dreamwars? The best way to think about Dreamwars is to think of it as a somewhat I don't want to say simple because it's still kind of convoluted, but a relatively simplistic Arkham Horror 2nd Edition or Eldritch Horror set in a steampunk world. And I'm sure to a lot of people that sounds really awesome. And that is what it is when you kind of just look at its core concepts. You have a number of different characters. I think the Kickstarter version came with I'm playing with 3 characters, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 different characters that you could play as, with people like Aber Bahal, the gunner, or Harold Garrison, the machine doctor, Aylor Sandar, the blood songster, Kadri Cartel, Elgart, the headhunter, Melanie West, the lady, Dunkard Yeager, the ranger, Liana Stern, the sky pirate, Aitin Delar, the alchemist. And the stats on your character's card, you have different kinds of stats for melee attack and skills and using tech weapons. And arcane songs are called cantors, are the magical energy in this game. You have your movement rating, you have your health value, and then you have your starting gear. So you have a number of starting common items, a number of starting tech items, a number of starting dream shards. Dream shards are one-use items that also act as a currency. And your starting number of cantors, or your spells, your song spells, and then your maximum number. And then each character has 3 different special powers that you can unlock by doing certain things throughout the game. Sometimes you unlock them and they become a permanent unlock. Other times you unlock them each time you do something. So for instance, this guy has a power of heal 1 life point and it is rechargeable. That means that each time you kill a horror nemesis, so the nemesis, the nemesi, these are the different monsters that you're going to be fighting, and some of them are marked by being horrific. And if they are for that character, each time you would kill one, then that character could heal a life. So all of the characters do have different abilities. Some of them are easier to unlock than others. Some of them are more powerful than others. So there are a few different ways to tell the characters apart. None of the characters play drastically different. Although sometimes some of the characters, depending on whether or not they can use skills or not, or spells, cantors, they will interact with the board different in certain places, depending on if they have spells available to them. The characters I am playing as right now are Black Rose, the Queen of Guns. She's like a gunslinging gambler. I am playing as Max, the Sentinel. He's a robot, a steampunk man, or a steam-powered robot man. And Hariel Scent, the Wind Weaver. She is my cantor, and she's my spell weaver there. So that's the those are the heroes that I have in my party now. And right now I am over in the city of Helfen. And as you can tell, yes, this game has a really cool looking map. It is kind of a messy map in that it's a little more form than function, because the spaces are marked off by these dotted lines. And once you start getting up into some of the busier areas, it is nearly impossible to tell where those dotted lines are. Additionally, this is an example of the map is not the territory. And what I mean by that is that really none of the things on the map have any kind of impact in how you play the game. The forests don't take anything extra to move through. The only thing that really does is this river, these river spaces. It takes a little more movement to move through them, and sometimes you have to go to the bridges if you want to cross them normally. And the road spaces are a little bit bigger and longer, so it's a little easier to travel distances on the road. I do like that. I think that is a really neat mechanism there, kind of like folklore. One of the things that is kind of weird about the game, about the map, is it does state in the rulebook that the walls are powerful barriers against enemies, keeping enemies out of the important cities, but the walls don't block any kind of movement at all. At least it doesn't say so in the rulebook. Some players do play that you can only enter cities through the walls, through the gates, but that leads to some really interesting problems in some of the scenarios where if you start in a city and you have to get somewhere by a certain amount of time, it is possible to, if you only use the gates and the roads, that you actually don't have enough time to get to where you need to go. I think there are two main cities. There is Helfen and there is Falkenberg there. And so, but yeah, this map is awesome. And what I am going to be using the map for is an upcoming series where I'm going to be playing a solo RPG. And this is going to be the overworld that I am going to be adventuring in. So that is pretty cool. So what you're going to do is in a game is you are going to pick a number of heroes. This game plays up to 8. I cannot imagine playing with 8. Best is probably about 3 to 5. You're going to pick your characters, and then you're going to pick a nemesis. And there are 9 different nemesi to play against. Right now, I am playing against Cinther, the Whisperer of Death. And then there is also Chamberlain Berogron, Master Ephizon, Rakaroth, Hakaron, Mitrak, Arganor, Zakathor, the names in this game, and Admiral Caesar. And each one of those, there's actually 2. There's going to be 2. They're in like a pair. Actually, there's 3. So there are 3 different factions defined by this icon. And each one of those factions has its own set of minions that you're going to be fighting against. You're going to be drawing those out from this bag here, and they are going to be spawning at certain points on the board. Until you kind of get to know this map, it is a little hard to figure out where exactly these monsters are spawning from. You have to kind of look through the map and look at every single space to find the name of the place you want. And there is a pretty big variety of minions here that you're going to be fighting, and each one will have some stats like their defense value or the number that you have to roll to defend against them, their health, and their movement. And then also a little story here on the back, a little synopsis of what they're about. You don't understand the power you are playing with. Dreams can corrupt. They can grow outside their host's body and change it in ways you could never imagine. Some of the flavor text, and we'll explore that a little bit more, is quite well written. And that's one of the things that this game does well, is it can create some interesting emergent narratives as you're playing. It does a good job of drawing you into its theme and its world. In addition to each of the different minion selections that the 3 factions are going to have, each faction also has a set of event cards, and these are going to be drawn 1 per turn at the beginning of the turn. Each turn is separated into phases. You have an event phase where you draw an event card, you have a hero phase where all the heroes move, and then you have a nemesis phase where all of the monsters move. And at the top of the round, the first player is going to draw one of these event cards, and it's going to have a certain number of things. It's going to have a little bit of flavor text. A subtle humming sound is doing something to your sense of balance. Then it's going to have a certain way that this event affects the game. Every hero in play suffer a -1 modifier to any dodge or defense. Okay, and then it's going to tell you where the monsters spawn. And depending on how many heroes are playing, you will either spawn 1, 2, or 3 monsters at each of the different portals. And there are quite a few of these. Now, the most interesting thing about these cards here are these icons at the bottom. There are 3 different icons. You have suns, you have moons, and then I guess two different icons, suns and moons. But depending on the combination that comes out, each one of these event cards is actually going to stay out for 3 rounds. So at the first time you have 3 out is the 3rd turn of the game. You're going to look at the combination of these suns and moons. And then if they match up with these icons on the Nemesis sheet that you are playing against, well, then the stars have aligned. And then I guess there is 3. There are stars, suns, and moons. Okay, I thought there was 3. But if the 3 cards that are out, if they're the same number of icons of stars, suns, or moons, then one of these special abilities is going to trigger. So that is really cool. And these special powers will stay out for 3 turns. So the first turn, you only have one special thing you have to worry about. The second turn, you have 2. And then by the 3rd turn, and for the rest of this scenario, you're going to have 3 different kind of rule-breaking things that is going to happen on the game. So in this one, I had every hero who has at least an ally or a mercenary must test his fate 4. If he fails, he discards. So you don't trust your allies. All common items have a chance of breaking when you use them. And then in this one, anytime a hero wants to perform an attack or intone a cantico, that's cast a spell against a nemesis, if there is more than one eligible target, he must roll off to determine which nemesis he will target. So if there's more than one enemy that you can attack, you don't get to choose. Fate chooses who you attack. So that's pretty cool. And then depending on the combination, something else bad might happen. In addition to the little minion guys, the different factions will also have a big monster, and they will also have different leaders that can come out at certain times. So the enemies are pretty interesting, and just the way that they impact the game, the way that each faction, so there are 3 different event decks, and each of the Nemesi has their own scenario in the scenario book. So there are 9 different scenarios, but the scenarios are somewhat complex, and they are kind of like mini campaigns. So you will have the name of the campaign, you will have its difficulty, and then you have a beginning scenario. If you win that scenario, you go to scenario 2A, and then that scenario will have 2 different branching paths. If you lose the first scenario, you go to scenario 2B, and then that scenario will have 2 branching paths. So you do kind of fail forward, but things are, if you win, it gets a little better. You have a better story outcome. So the scenarios are kind of interesting. My main problem with them is they are incredibly difficult, and a lot of that has to do with this token here, which is of course a clock, a timer. A lot of the stories, a lot of the scenarios are timer based, where you have to do a certain number of things by a certain turn, and it can be really difficult to pull that off. For instance, the one that I am on now, let me see if I can find it really quick here. Now I'm just going to look up in the table of contents real quick so I can find it. It's called A Silent Night, and that is on page 38. So the beginning of this scenario, it's having me do a certain number of things, and I have 9 turns to do it. I have to, every time I kill a moonlight hag, a taintress soul, or a tinkling stinger. That says tingling, but on the actual minion it says a tinkling stinger. So anytime I kill one of those, I get a point towards victory. Anytime I resolve an adventure card regarding an ally, cantor, or a mercenary, I get a point towards my victory. And anytime a cantor hero, so a spell slinging hero, resolves an adventure card, then I also get a certain, I'm looking for these clues, and I have 9 turns to do them. The main problem is all 3 of those are based entirely on luck. So the one is killing a certain enemy. As you're pulling those out of the bag, you may not get the enemies you are looking for. The other one is dealing with having adventures in these decks. So depending on whether or not you are in a city or you are out in the wilderness, on certain spots at the end of each hero's turn, they are going to draw one of these cards, and this is kind of like your little adventure cards. So for instance, this one would be Eric Fjorder, the Barrow's First Knight. This is a human fighter, and this says that the day you arrived in the city, a mysterious figure in steel armor was standing on the city walls looking at you. Now that you are about to leave, it is there as well, his eyes set on you. It is Eric Fjorder, the Baron's First Knight, a living legend who is said to come to help aid of the brave, to the aid, it said, let me start that again, who is said to come to the aid of the brave who fight the most desperate of battles. Once drawn, this card must be deployed on the table besides the events in play. Special abilities for the next 3 turns. If any hero loses at least 1 life point after failing a defense test, Eric comes to his aid. So that's kind of cool. Some of these adventure cards are pretty cool. They will have you doing certain tests. They will have certain pass and fail conditions. But for victory conditions, you're looking for certain ones. And depending on how you've shuffled these, well, you may not actually find them in time to solve your quest. And the same goes for out in the Outland Mysteries. If you are outside of a city in certain spots, you will draw one of these. The Haunted Wood. In this part of the forest, the trees are strange, contorted, very old. Whenever the wind blows through their fronds, you have the impression they are whispering your name and trying to tell you which way to go. Will you listen to what they say? Test your arcane. If you succeed, the tree spirits guide you through the forest and teach you a beautiful, sad melody. Draw 1 Cantico. And then if you fail, something bad happens. So these, we all love viewers of the Dungeon Dive, and you guys know that I love random encounters, and this game has quite a few. So I do like that, but I don't think I have ever won the first scenario in any of the little campaigns that I've played. And that is always because of the time limit. I've had ones before where I could barely get halfway to a victory condition before the timer ran out. And I'm thinking that if I ever play, or when I play this game again, if I play this game again, I'm just going to completely ignore the timer mechanism or just set it to the max, which is 15. The other things that you might encounter during this game are a number of different items. Like I said, you have these dream shards here. Now these dream shards are one-use items. A lot of times they can heal, or they can add to your chances to do something like an attack or a defense. They can give you rerolls. These are kinds of a currency that you can use to help mitigate luck, basically. And these are also the money in the game, which is kind of a neat idea. So when you go to certain spots, especially in the city, you can trade by discarding one dreamstone to draw from the specific deck of tech items or common items. So tech items are interesting because they are a little bit more powerful than common items, and these are different tools and different weapons and armor. But since they are kind of a mystery, a technological anomaly, some of them, there is a 1 in 6 chance that every time you use it, you will have to discard it after you use it. So you roll, and if you roll a 6, rolling low in this game is better, then you have to discard the item after you use it. But these are some more interesting items. And then you have some common items, which you have things like maps and tickets, so you can buy passage to travel faster, and more mundane weapons like axes, a long sword, and shields, or wrenches, ropes, tools, and that kind of thing. So lots of neat items. So there is some interesting things to find. And there are also a number of different spells. And these spells have range in abilities from being like purely utility to mitigating luck to doing attacks and defense, transportation, all kinds of different things. And the art is pretty nice on them. I think overall the art is pretty good in this game. I've seen better, I've seen worse, but I like some of it. I absolutely love the way the board looks. Just phenomenal. I cannot wait to play a solo RPG on this board because of the named places. We have the Circle of the Four Winds, the Hidden Pit, the Avarian Shrine, the Black Market, the Watchtower in Ruins, the Synod of Voices, the Swamps, and each one of those places can be an adventure location where you could go in and have a different adventure. I'm really looking forward to developing this world into my own world to explore. But the main problem in this game is the rulebook. It is just a real mess. Like I said, it doesn't mention at all about moving through walls. I don't think anything on the map except for the water has any gameplay elements. It really doesn't specifically say if you even have to have a weapon to attack. I bought my game secondhand and everything was in really good condition, but the guy who I bought the game from underlined and circled a bunch of stuff in the rulebook. And I understand why, because trying to make heads or tails of this rulebook is a real challenge. First of all, look at that, just this wall of text here. And it's poorly laid out with it's very front loaded with rules, but it doesn't get to the explanation of the Nemesis cards and the hero cards and the items until after it's already explained the rules. The keyword system is all over the place. Things seem to be randomly bolded for no reason, where certain keywords are not bolded. It's really hard to find particular sections. It's really hard to find specific rules of when you can and can't do things or how to do things. It has the most useless index in the world. Index, an alphabetical listing of key words and no page numbers. Just a really poorly worded rule book that leaves so many questions unanswered, and the developer never really came back with any answers. This game needs a lot of house rules just to get to the table, just to play. You will be beating your head against the wall if you're anything like me. Your first few games is trying to figure it out. And it's not a very complicated game. It's just that the rule book leaves a lot to be desired. And the fact that there is no FAQ, the fact that the designer and the developer has left everybody high and dry for years is just, yeah, it really sucks, because this game aesthetically has a lot going for it. It has a cool world. It has some interesting elements with the Nemesis, with their different event decks, how each of them have a different group of minions that you're going to be fighting, the way those stars align to trigger different things. You know, the heroes, while not super different, they do have different abilities. You have lots of items that you can use, lots of different powers. But the problem is it doesn't come together to be better than the sum of all of its parts. And the truth of the matter is, there are so many games like this that I would rather play than this game. I could play Eldritch Horror, I could play Arkham Horror, I could play Machina Arcana, I could play A Touch of Evil, I could play Folklore, I could play Hexplore It. Just so many of these kind of overland crawl games and these co-op adventure games that are out there now, that there really isn't a reason to ever play Dreamwars over any of those others. However, if you are looking for a really kick-ass game board and a map to use in an RPG or your own homebrew game, you might want to get this game. It's a nice big board. It has cool art. It has really interesting, evocatively named places that you could set your adventures in. And sometimes I just look at this map, and I'm so glad that I've decided to play this solo RPG. It's going to be a long series, something very different for the Dungeon Dive. And I'm thinking that I'm going to use Scarlet Heroes as the basis, as the rules for my game, and then I'm going to incorporate a whole bunch of different bits and pieces and things from other games. For instance, like let's say I go into this hidden pit. Well, maybe in Folklore, maybe there's a little map. You know how Folklore has those individual maps for each of its places. Maybe there's a cool one to use for some of these locations. You know, maybe we'll go into the Solitary Crypt over here, and I'll use tiles from Warhammer Quest for when I'm in there to play a little dungeon crawl game. I'm really excited to kind of develop my own game and play that with everyone. I'm going to have the Patreon. I'm going to have the patrons kind of come up with different NPCs, help me come up with different story hooks, different quest ideas, and that kind of thing. It's going to be a really neat time, I think. And that's going to be happening probably starting in September. But as of right now, this was a look at Dreamwars, a somewhat mediocre, lackluster co-op adventure game in the vein of Arkham Horror 2nd Edition or something like A Touch of Evil. It has some neat ideas, it has some neat components, it has a beautiful board, but unfortunately it is not a undiscovered gem, so I do not encourage anybody to go out and hunt down a copy unless, of course, you're looking for a really neat game board to use for other games. So, all right, guys, well, I hope you enjoyed this look at Dreamwars. I wish I could say that it was just a great game that maybe not a lot of people have heard of or played. I wish it was better even if there was just a better written rule book with an FAQ and some tightening up of the rules, and maybe the designer letting us know some of the answers to questions that have been out there for 5 years. You know, some definitive answers without people having to house rule. I wish that these scenarios were better balanced, because they are just, the timer almost always, I have found, leads to losses, but at least you get to move forward. But it would be nice to see those other examples and the other paths in those campaigns. It has some good loot, so it has all of those things that we're looking for. Unfortunately, those things don't come together to make a great game, and that's a real bummer. So, all right, guys, well, we will talk to you later. Take it easy. Bye-bye.